Let's look at the astrology for the week of July 8th through the 14th and kind of follow Venus on a heroine's journey out of Cancer and into Leo, where she is going to renew herself and find that spotlight that is meant for her. And hopefully we end up finding that we are on a similar journey. So I would like to share my screen. And here you can see the beginning of the week on the 8th of July. We are sitting here with Venus at 26 degrees in Cancer. Now, on this same day, she is going to be forming that sextile aspect. If we can clear everything out here, she's forming this sextile with Uranus. So Venus's journey begins with some new information, with some surprises, with a change in direction. Uranus is known as unpredictable. So we're just going to go with that and say something surprising begins with Venus at the beginning of this week. Venus for us can symbolize female figures in our lives, feminine figures, feminine presenting figures in our lives. It can also represent the arts. It can represent abundance that comes to us, riches. It can represent relationships. So thinking about Venus in her archetype in that way, and then looking at where Venus is in your chart and what your relationship to Venus is in your chart will make a big difference as well. Venus is moving out of the cardinal sign of Cancer and into the fixed sign of Leo this week. So we're going to see where Cancer is in your chart. And again, how Venus is reacting to your natal chart, what your natal chart is doing with Venus's movement. If Venus is activated for you by a certain timing technique, this is something that would make it easier for you to feel what Venus is up to. Or if you were simply someone born at night, you might notice, because Venus would be considered the benefic of sect in your chart. So she is the one who brings the extra goodness and the extra sweetness. Ironically, in Valens, she's said to be the ruler of greasy flavors as well. So if you find yourself craving greasy foods, especially for the last month or so, that might have been Venus in Cancer. So what we're seeing now, though, is Venus going through this transition that Uranus brings about just as she is getting ready to leave the sign of Cancer. And you can actually see the journey that she's going to take. It's all outlined right here throughout the rest of the week. So she's going to meet up with Uranus first in this sextile aspect. Then she's going to meet up with Neptune by trine. And then, of course, she's going to cross over into Leo, where that opposition with Pluto will take effect. So we can actually follow this throughout. But I also want to make sure that we're not ignoring the other planets who are also up to things this week. At this time on this same day, you can see Mercury is just separating from this sextile aspect with Jupiter. So we have this going on as well. Jupiter represents your categoric abundance, saying yes to things, bringing a lot of things in. Jupiter in Gemini has felt a little bit like a Mercury retrograde. It's taken some getting used to for a lot of us. So Jupiter saying yes to all the different questions that keep coming in has been giving us sort of crossed wires as we're going through this. And now Mercury is saying, hey, buddy, I see you over there in my sign. Everything good? And so hopefully around this time, we get to feel a little bit more seen in our conversations, and we get to feel a little bit more discerning in the things that are in our lives, the choices that we are making, and how they relate to us. What centered and focused decision can we make in our connections, in our communications, and in our thoughts and prognostications as well, which is another thing that Mercury does. Prognostications, of course, being sort of predictions, which could be like what you're looking forward to doing or what you expect to happen. And it can also be in divination, much like astrology. So that is something that we're experiencing. And then if we pop forward a couple days onto the 10th, we'll see the next aspect we get, which is actually the Sun trine with Saturn here. So we do have this supportive aspect between the Sun and Saturn. Saturn, of course, being the greater malefic. So what we're seeing here is the Sun's energy in Cancer receiving support by this overcoming trine from Saturn. Saturn is bringing this energy to the Sun as the Sun passes by. And so it's kind of like the Sun getting a little bit of support as the Sun is navigating through the waters of Cancer, heading towards the Sun's own sign of Leo later this month. So we can find perhaps some support in some decisions that we're making, or some inner insight that just feels true and accurate, and like we make these decisions feeling confident about them. Might be something that comes forward with this as well in personal lives. And of course, that's my focus here on these videos, is what does this astrology do for you? this week? What can you get out of it? If you want to know more about predictions about what's going to happen in the world with astrology, that is something I cover in the Modern School of Ancient Wisdom student study tier and higher on Patreon, because I want to make sure that if I'm telling you what I think the astrology is going to do in our world, it's something that you get to choose to hear rather than me just blurting out these things to you, which may sometimes be really great and may sometimes be more sensitive. So that's the choice that you get to make if you choose to join the Patreon, where we talk more about the unfolding of world events with astrology. For these videos, it's how does this affect you? What can you do with it? How can you be the most empowered throughout the week? And so the next thing we'll move on to is going to be on the 11th here, where Venus makes that trine we saw before with Neptune just before she crosses over into Leo. So these two things will happen on the same day. As you can see, Neptune is very close to the end of Pisces and actually moving backwards now. Neptune will actually not make it out of Pisces. I can show you this. It's really cool. Neptune will make it out of Pisces if we go to zodiac sign transits. March 30th, 2025. That is when Neptune will actually make it into Pisces. So thinking about now being July 11th, we have plenty of time. Another thing we can look at here is when Neptune finishes retrograde on December 7th. And so we can see a little bit of this timeline going on. Neptune is retrograde now. We'll stay that way until December 7th. We'll stay in Pisces until March 30th of next year, but is dancing around those final minutes of Pisces for the next several months as we're anticipating this change, which will be pretty much on a very wide interpersonal scale. Neptune is very far out there, so it takes Neptune a long time. In fact, we can see here how long Neptune has been in Pisces. So we know Neptune goes in Aries March 30th next year, but Neptune came into Pisces back in 2012. So it's been quite the journey for Neptune at this point. So that's one of the niftier features of Luna. If you did want to invest in Luna, I do have a code in the description that will give you 10% off because it is a really fun, user-friendly, beginner-friendly, and expert-friendly program. So then we move on to on the 12th, when Venus will hit that first degree of Aquarius and have that opposition with Pluto. Now, Pluto is known for making small things big and big things small, unearthing things, bringing things to light, and also either reviving something that is ready to be revived or bringing something to an end that is ready to be brought to an end so that new growth can happen. I always like to equate Pluto to sort of volcanic activity where you have this big disastrous thing, but it makes the ground very fertile so that new life can grow. That's quite Plutonic. So that's something that we want to keep in mind as we're going through this, as Venus comes into Leo, and perhaps our relationships start becoming something that we're more aware of in a very personal or individual sense in our lives. And again, check where Leo is in your chart to see what area of life that house represents. That area of life, if you happen to be a Sagittarius rising, it would be your 9th house. But you want to check your rising sign and see the numbered house that is associated with Venus in Leo, and then see what are my relationships doing in this area of my life. In this case, your 9th house might be your relationship or the female figures that you encounter in spirituality, in your worldview, in your higher education, things like that. Venus could be representing that type of event or person coming in and kind of giving you this new information, something big that you can then take that information with, become this more activated and awakened version of yourself, become actualized in a sense, and with that information, move forward in your power. Pluto also represents power. And I like to think about the empowerment. Sometimes Pluto will make you feel powerless so that you rise to an occasion and then feel empowered moving forward once you've overcome it. So these are some things to think about. Again, it seems like a bit of an emotional roller coaster this week. We have Venus interacting with Uranus and then Neptune and then Pluto. So she is talking to all of these intrapersonal planets, bringing them down into the heart of the situation, both through Leo and emotionally through Venus. And so this is something that I would recommend taking gentle care this week. When you get new information, honor your emotions. Ask yourself how you feel about that. Ask yourself what you want to do about that. Give yourself the time to process anything that you're feeling until you come around to feeling again that empowerment of, I know what I want to do. I've decided what is best for me. I know the relationships, the interactions, the choices that I want to make. And then you can move forward with that. And again, we do have the support of making wise decisions with that Mercury and Jupiter interaction earlier in the week, and Saturn and the Sun interacting in the middle of the week. So be discerning this week. You deserve to be discerning, and it's okay for you to make choices that are aligned with you and that are best for you. Once you have taken care of yourself, you are much more able and then even more willing to do things and help and interact with others and to really spread that light that you will gain. So when we think about that, the folk magic for this week of July 8th through the 14th, I'm really focusing on how hot it's been. For my Modern School of Ancient Wisdom students studied here, we focused on different ways to tend to your garden and natural ways to make sure pests don't get into the plants or the gardens that we are enjoying and that we are cultivating. But another thing I recommend is if you find yourself in the heat this week and it gets to you a little too much, one of my favorite plants since childhood. This was probably the first encounter I've ever had with the magic and healing power of plants, was simply aloe. Have you ever experienced an aloe plant? And I will say, at a lot of the home goods stores like Lowe's and Home Depot and all of those places, they are currently selling little pots of aloe. You can get like a big aloe plant or you can get a little one and bring it into your home, let it grow. And I just remember when I was a kid, not my wisest decision. There was a toaster plugged in, toasting toast as it would, and I put my whole hand on that toaster. And before I could even let out the scream of pain, my grandmother had a sprig of aloe ripped open and was rubbing it on my palm. And it was, again, it's like InstaSalve, InstaSalve to make your hand feel better, to take away the heat from those burns, to really soothe those wounds. And it was amazing how I went from, I'm ready to scream, this hurts really bad, to, whoa, that actually feels okay. What did you just do? And so I appreciate the healing power and the properties that aloe has for that. Aloe is good for a lot of other things, but if you find yourself with a little too much sunburn or other occasions this week where you might want to use it, aloe is a salve in and of itself, ready to go as soon as you peel it open. And of course, we're always grateful to the energy of the plants that donate their uses to us when we need them. So feel free to go pick up an aloe plant and start your relationship with plants in that way. Aloe is a really, really good one. I hope you have a fantastic week. I hope that you are safe, and I hope that the sun doesn't find you too closely and that you do not receive any burns. But if you do, that you feel supported in your own wisdom and in the people around you.